Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, where, as always, we fling open the doors of your local comic book shop and bring you interviews with your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. I am Joe Marcello, and today we're bringing you our interview with another returning guest. I love that people like coming back to us. We're doing something right. So we have another returning guest. His name is Jack C. Harris. Obviously, you know him from a previous episode, but today we're discussing his latest book, Working with Ditko, from TwoMorrows Publishing nonetheless. But this book goes into basically Steve Ditko's career and Jack's, friendship with him over the years. And he really got to know Steve Ditko, how his mind works, how he thought of his work professionally and personally in some cases. And really, got to really delve into someone's career and mindset who has really been somewhat of a mystery over the years. He's somewhat of an enigma, but so interesting. So without further ado, let's get to it. This is Jack Harris.
And we are joined by comic and DC legend Jack C. Harris. Jack put out a wonderful book. It is called Working with Ditko. It's put out by our friends at TwoMorrows Publishing. And if you look on the back, there's a handsome picture of a young Jack Harris as well with Mr. Ditko. So, Jack, thank you so much for coming back. This book is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be back.
So, again, I want to take a chance to thank you. I didn't have a chance to interview you last time, but obviously I worked on the interview and posted it. So it was great to hear. And to kick it off, I'm going to ask, how did you come up with this idea for the book?
Well, I was during the pandemic, since I had nothing else to do, I decided to clean my house. So starting with the garage, which I've never in my life have had an organized garage, but now I do. And so that's what I did. I did the attic, the garage, the office, everything, just piling up stuff. So when I was all finished organizing everything, I looked over and I had this large stack of stuff, and I had sorted out and organized it. It was all Ditko stuff, Xeroxes and sketches and art, all that I had done with Ditko. I said, wow, there's enough there for a book. So I wrote a letter off to John Morrow of TwoMorrows Publishing, and I said, would you be interested in something like this? And he goes, absolutely, we would. So I sent him a outline, and very shortly after that, he said, yeah, we need this. We'll do this. Here's a contract. Let's do it. And it took me about, I guess, a little less than a year to write it. And when I turned it in person, I went down to the Baltimore Comic Convention and gave it the manuscript and all the flash drives with all the art to John. And a year later, they published it. And that's how it came about.
It seemed like it really came together quite fast. I mean, I'm sure pandemic didn't hurt, but
I was surprised how fast I did it. I mean, it just came out of my head very quickly. The only thing I really had to research was the order and the timing and the dates of the things that I did, because I remembered it all, but I didn't know which came first and how long it took, things like that. So that was the only research I really had to do for it.
Given all your extensive research, and obviously you're living through a lot of events, were there things that maybe didn't make the final edition of the book?
Not really. Everything I ever did with Steve, I think, is either mentioned or visually represented in the book. I don't think I forgot anything. I tried to get some really obscure stuff that we did, like the stuff that didn't get published, and a couple of other little things. But I mean, just little things like one-page intro he did for a mystery book and things like that. I think I got it all. I did a little research online about, people have lists of things that I've done, and I tried to match up all the ones that I did with Steve, and I think I got them all. I don't think I missed anything. I really don't. So it's all there.
I'm curious because, today when we look at Steve Ditko, he's on the Mount Rushmore of comics. I mean, he's a legend.
Right.
when you were first working at DC, was he viewed as prestigious as he is now, or was he seen as a good, writer and artist, but not as popular as he is today?
It's really hard to remember exactly how the company viewed him.
Mhm,
They were very happy to have him there,
mhm,
and they always made sure that he had work.
mhm,
I mean, it was like if he was coming in to turn something in, they said, make sure you have something for him to leave with. We never wanted him idle. We wanted to, and then when he finally came in with his own stuff, and they left the door open for that. They said, Steve, if you have an idea for something, we want to see it.
mhm.
Come bring it to us, and we will see it. That's how Shade came around. He came up with that, and he did the first issue as just on spec, and just brought it in and said, "You want to do this?" And they go, "Yeah, we do," and that's how it happened. So yeah, he was one of those things where they wanted to keep him busy no matter what. They really wanted him out there.
Was there ever a plan to just say, "Hey, Steve, would you like to work on Aquaman? Like that'll be your bulk, or would you like to work on Hawkman, or what, a regular series, and just have him be the man on that
I
book?"
don't. First of all, I don't think he wanted to do that, and
Okay.
secondly, I don't remember anyone ever approaching that as an idea. We were more interested in what he could do originally,
Okay.
brand new stuff that was, Ditko,
Mhm.
and I think that's where they wanted to go with him, as far as I can tell. I remember a couple years earlier, they did the thing with Kirby.
Mhm.
When he was coming back doing all the First World, they made a big deal out of that,
Right.
full page ads about the great one is coming and things like
Mhm.
that. And I don't think it went as well as they wanted to. So I don't think they wanted to do that again. And I
Okay.
think they were sort of they were shy about it. So
Makes sense.
but again, I don't know the inner workings of the head office at the time. I really
Mhm.
don't know what their thinking was along those lines. I'm only guessing.
In your opinion and in your experience, when do you think? I'm going to preface this with, for a person who has had such an extensive career, I mean, he has worked everywhere and done so much. And, Orrin and I have had the pleasure to interview so many people over the years, but I don't think anyone matches his just a amount of work. I mean, we just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you kind of forget, oh, yes, he did this, he did this.
Yeah, right.
In your opinion, like, do you think there was any particular period, whether it's through art or writing, that maybe he was at his absolute best, or was there he was hitting at all cylinders all throughout his career?
Well, I always thought um, that the Spider-Mans he did were the best thing he ever did, because and there's all controversy and talk about this, but he plotted all of those. He that was him 100%. Stan did the dialoguing, but that was about all Stan did. Uh, he came up with all those incredible villains like Doctor Octopus and the Vulture and things like that, and even the relationships between the characters, like you know Peter and Betty Brant, and Peter and Liz Allen, and Peter and Mary Jane Watson. All that was Ditko. He did all of that. He did that with Flash Thompson and things like that. Stanley would do things like he would say, have him fight Doctor Doom this issue, and that's all he would say,
Mhm.
and then Steve would do the rest. You know, and sometimes he would give him credit for that. Like I remember on the Doctor Strange annual where he did the annual. I think it was the second one where Doctor Strange was the guest star, and Stanley made a big thing. Oh, Stevie Ditko plotted this one, but he plotted all of them. I'm sorry, every one of them. And I think I remember as a fan, as a kid, I always thought his his figure work got better because of the way he drew Spider-Man. Spider-Man jumping around and the way he had him swinging around on the web upside down and climbing up the sides of buildings and things like that was just so different. And you never saw any other character that looked like that. The way they moved and the way they turned and everything. So I think that was his peak. I think that was the best he was ever done. He just didn't
do,
get enough credit for it.
do you think there was ever anything he worked on that maybe he wanted to revisit to kind of, I wouldn't say do better, because I think every artist is pretty proud of their work, but maybe get a second crack at, and maybe do
Well,
again?
his whole idea was uh, this was the project, and if I'm not on it anymore, then it's finished. So let's go on to something else.
Okay.
He really didn't want to rehash anything he did, and especially Spider-Man. He wouldn't even talk about Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I mean, never. He never wanted to. I mean, I never approached him about it ever because I knew how he felt about it. So never talked about it. I never heard him talk about. Occasionally, he mentioned a few little tidbits. I remember one comment. Somebody was talking about the cover that he did for Spider-Man, where the Molten Man, where Spider-Man was all in black.
Mhm.
You just saw the webbing is all you saw was, and Molten Man was in the background, and the whole thing was like black. And someone mentioned that cover where they were showing it, and Steve was there, and he goes, oh God, that took a whole bottle of ink to ink that cover. And he says, Stanley hated that cover until it was colored. And that's all he ever said about it. Just that he hated that cover until it was colored, then he was happy with it. But I never heard him talking extensively about his work and time in Marvel at all.
Yeah. Two books off the top of the bat that I want to talk about, and one is, I was never a big sword and sorcery fan, but I like Stalker. I thought that was a very interesting concept, and did you get the feeling that DC wasn't pushing that book maybe as much as they could, despite the fact of what was going into it?
I really don't know. DC wasn't pushing any books.
Okay.
Really, they just put everything out there and was hoping if something caught on, then they would make a big deal out of it. But I never got the impression that they were promoting anything out of the ordinary. Like they didn't push it over the edge. So no, I don't think they did that at all. Which I thought. I mean, one of the things that we did as editors, we got to write our own house ads. So okay, your ad, you have an ad this month, you can pick whatever book you want, write a house ad. I had a lot of fun with those.
Yeah.
Writing a house ad and picking up the art and things like that for that. But that was, it rotated to editors. It really had nothing to do with what book was there. It just said, okay, it's this editor's turn. Promote whatever book you want, and that's the way it went. So
the other character I want to bring up is one he did earlier on. You go through this book wonderfully, all the such interesting characters he came up with it, but one that's still very popular in circles is the Creeper. And I want to know what your thoughts of the character, because I think the way the character's put together, it's crazy, but it works. And I think there's so much that could be done with that character.
Right. Well, Mike Gold, I think I mentioned in the book, Mike Gold felt that the Creeper was the most Ditko-esque creation that Steve ever did. That was like his guy. I mean, the Creeper was the Creeper because that was Steve. And I think that he liked to go back to that. For instance, he had done the Creeper, and I mentioned this in the book too. And Mike Gold suggested we bring it back in World's Finest for the little 8-pagers that he did. And Steve was like, right away. I mean, didn't even hesitate. Oh yeah, we'll do that. I'll do that. No problem. And I remember, I think I talk about it was funny thing was that DC had done a couple of stories of the Creeper, and one of the things Steve did right away was he wiped out all of the references to the other stories that he didn't do, just got rid of them. That didn't happen. That was gone. The continuity is finished, and he ended it. Things like that. So that was good. So getting him to come back and review and do more of that character was easy, because I think that was actually a personal favorite of his. I remember whenever someone else did something for him, he would just sort of shake his head. He goes, "They can't leave him alone."
The next thing I want to talk about is, and I really love in this book that you talk about projects I've never heard of. And one of them, I don't know, I forget if it came to pass or not, but it's a Fantasy Master. I believe the Choose Your Own
Oh, yeah.
Adventure comic that
Right.
you want to do.
Right. Oh, man.
That seems like such a huge undertaking because
Oh,
everything can go in so many different directions. It would have to be quite the thick comic book.
there's a script. There's a script for it. That's how
Oh,
thick
wow.
it is.
Oh, that's a hefty script.
Yes, it goes on forever. You know, so yes, that was tricky to write. That was a trick. That book. It never came to be, unfortunately, but it came about. The whole choose your own adventure type of things, and it predated the role playing games
Mhm.
and the computer games. It all stemmed from that. That's where it all started.
Right.
And I thought it would be adapted to comic books. A couple of things I realized that when I wrote that, everything had to be a double page spread.
Okay.
Because I didn't want anyone, I didn't want you to be able to peek ahead.
Mhm.
When you're holding the book opened, then you don't know what's on the next page. So all that stuff has to be related in each 2-page spread,
Mhm.
And that was one of the things I had to consider. Then I had to play test it. I had 3 daughters, and they were all into that stuff because of me, and I play tested the whole book with them before, in script form, and it was like a verbal game that we played. Where do you want to go now? Okay, we have to go to page 7, so let's go there. Okay, now you got to page 22, and had to dance around the book. I always thought that first of all, that book was going to wear out. If that ever got published, there was never going to be a mint copy after a while. People are going to flip the pages back and forth to go around. And I thought, well, if you're going to print it, you got to print it on some really pristine paper, things that will last. You have to double bind it or put it bounded or something. Otherwise, just reading a regular comic book a few times will wear it out. But something like that was going to just really be tough to keep it going. And then I always thought that because one of the things, the way you choose the path, there was 2 ways you could do it. One, you got to choose, it was on the page, but then the other one was like you had 6 different choices, and you rolled a die for that. And I thought it would be really great if you packaged the book up with your own die, came with it, so you unwrapped it and you had the special Fantasy Master die, and that would work with the book, and you could play with that. All that kind of stuff I was thinking ahead that would really be spectacular to do, but never came about. It's too bad.
But one thing I noticed,
have all the pencils for it right over here.
That's all. There's a theme that I noticed in this book, and I think it's part and parcel to what you were just talking about with this project, is that it seems like Steve Ditko really trusted you, and he trusted your vision. That when you came up with an idea, when you had a project for him, he believed that your idea would work. He believed that working with you would be best for him. Am I on? Do you think I'm on track with that, or?
Well, I think that came about because of the situation. I think again, all this is in the book. When I first met him, he was very shy. He didn't want to really pal around with the comic book crowd. He would come into my office. Now, if I remember correctly, when you came into the DC office, the editorial hallway was down the north side of the Warner building, which is where we were. The first office was Julie Schwartz's. He had the first editorial office. Then I think there were maybe 2 more between me and Julie, and then my office was there, and then right outside our office was the bullpen, which was drawing boards and typewriters set up for any freelancer want to come in and work there, do corrections and things like that. That was my little world. So when Steve came in, he usually went to see Joe Orlando, Paul Levitz, who were further down the hall from me. So he had to pass my office to get to theirs. And he was, again, right in front of the bullpen when he did that, which sometimes had other people there, which Steve didn't want to deal with. But Paul and Joe might be busy in a meeting or something, and they couldn't see him right away. So he wanted to duck in somewhere. He ducked into my office. And he would hang out in my office. And the thing is, if he was sitting in front of me, I had a chair in my office facing me, but you could sit there and someone could stand at the door and talk to me. They wouldn't see if anybody was sitting in that chair. So he could sit there quietly and wait for Joe and Paul to go. And then while he did that, he would show me what he brought in before anybody else, and I would comment on it. I would say, oh, well, this is cool. Why'd you do this? And we developed this whole appreciation of each other. He appreciated my opinion and my insights on what he was doing. And of course, I appreciated the fact that I got to see it before anybody else. So it was this really nice relationship. So when we threw out ideas, I talked out ideas. I mean, I'm sure there were instances that I don't recall, but in these specifics. But I remember a couple of times, I was, well, wait a minute, why shouldn't you do it this way? And he goes, oh yeah, right. And he would erase it and would change it right there, sitting in my office.
Wow.
Oh, that's better. That's better. Yeah, I'll do that. And he would change it right there while I was talking to him. So I did that more than once, and it used to drive me. I said, my God, I just told Steve Ditko what to do, and he did it. It was like, it's kind of surprising, and so, yeah, we had a really good relationship. So he was always willing to see what I came up with. If I had something new, I said, hey, you want to try this? Want to try this? Yeah, let's do it. So he'd do it. Okay. Now, sometimes I would say 90% of the times he would do 2 or 3 ballpoint pen drawings on paper to further. Most of the ones that I mentioned in the book of things that we worked on together, except for like Fantasy Master, we did the whole issue. But in most of the other ones, he just did like 2 or 3 pages of ballpoint drawings that just had the content right off the top of his head, and it was amazing. So that's what he did. But if you really pushed him and he really believed in it, then he would develop it like crazy. He would just go through the whole thing. Starguider was one that he did that, where he actually created the spaceship and the uniform, and I think we were going to go into what his ray gun did too, and all that kind of stuff. So it was great. Yeah, we had a great relationship that way.
I was curious. So again, and I think I probably figured out the answer to this based upon, your previous answer, but like, was there ever any apprehension on his part of tackling characters that have already been done by, say, Kirby? Because, this is probably more of our fandom in this, thinking this way, but, Jack Kirby is like, on that Mount Rushmore is probably like the first guy that goes up.
Well, I mean,
was there ever any apprehension on his part? Like, well, I have to do this justice, or this is just work and I'm going to do it.
I mean, if you think about it, Steve followed Jack Kirby throughout his whole career.
Yep.
I mean, his first job was inking Kirby at Kirby Studio. That was the first publication he ever did, was working on that. So, and he followed Kirby after on the Hulk. He followed Kirby on Iron Man, and there's probably half a dozen other ones that he did that as well that I can't recall. Right. Yeah, but so that never bothered him at all. But I always got the impression that he always thought he could do something better than whoever originated it. Right. That I think it was really relevant when he did redesigned Iron Man. Mm-hmm. I mean, Iron Man from the very beginning was this big clunky, robot-looking character, and then when Steve got onto it, he streamlined it, and to become basically what the Iron Man we see today is based on what Steve did with the way he could, compress his costume into a attaché case, and it could all expand. And then he did it with the Blue Beetle, which was like amazing, And then of course we did with Starguider, and of course I showed you in the book what he did with Batman. Yeah. And he just was never shy about that. He said, okay, I can do that character, and maybe I can add a little to it that's either different or better than it was originally. And he was always thinking ahead. What else can you do? Was his whole attitude was, yeah, we did that. What else can we do now?
I mean, he when you think of characters and there are certain looks and styles that jump out at in your mind when you think of, okay, Superman, Batman, etc. He has created so many of the iconic looks of
Oh, right.
characters
Yeah.
that it's
I
just
mean,
astounding. And you sit back and you think about it, like, oh my God, yeah, that's right. You don't realize it. And I think that's a shame, you know, unless they're
I think
people like us, you
that's
don't
right.
really realize it.
I think the greatest character, non-hero character he ever created was Dr. Octopus.
Mhm.
I mean, the visuals of that character and the name. I mean, the name is great.
Mhm.
You know, he came up with the name as well, and the character, and then to see that character on the screen, on the movie screen, in the second Spider-Man movie, where it worked, and it actually looked 100% real,
Mhm.
and he saw all that. He saw it visually like that. And he saw it in his mind's eye like a movie. And he always started all the characters. I mean, he did that with the Creeper. He started the story with the villain.
Right.
He said, "Okay, I'll make up a villain, and then we'll write a story around it."
Mhm.
You know, and that's what he did. And I'm sure that's what he did with Spider-Man too. I'm sure he came up with Dr. Octopus, and then said, "Okay, now let's work backwards and figure out how he's going to encounter, you know, how will he encounter Spider-Man, and how will Spider-Man defeat him?"
Mhm.
And he had that all worked out before he put pencil to paper. You know, he already knew.
Mhm.
And that was, I mean, and of course he was right, because all of it lasted. You know, all these characters, all the ones that were published, had any kind of long run, are still there, and still people still reading about them, and all because of him. Yeah.
Something you just mentioned, which is a phenomenal story in this book. Again, I highly recommend this book, but he's drawing Batman. You have these sketches you put in, and Batman's taken down a bad guy, and it's, I wouldn't say an overly violent fight, but there's violence to it, and there's one drip of blood on
Right.
Batman's cape, because could you talk a
Right.
little bit about that story, because to me it
Well,
blows my mind.
he had he thought that the little bat protrusions on Batman's glove were razor sharp.
Mhm.
That was his thought. And if Batman swiped up, he could cut you with them, or he could swipe down and cut off part of your tie, which is what the illustration shows.
Mhm.
And there's this illustration of this terrified criminal in front of Batman, and Batman has just, with the speed lines, you can see that he's just swiped his arm down and sliced off this guy's tie. But then Steve added one little drop of blood. Now, these are black and white, you know, ballpoint pen drawings, but he colored in the drop of blood with red ink. The little bit of drop of blood was there on the red ink. And that's why they rejected it. The powers, oh, that's too violent. We can't have Batman cutting somebody. No, it can't happen. You know, and that's why they said, oh, we're not going to let him do Batman. I said, are you crazy? I mean, come on. You can white out the drop of blood.
Right.
We don't need to do that, but that was it. They were adamant about it.
And it just would make sense for those things, because they do look like razors, like they do look
I
sharp.
know.
Coming down,
Yeah,
they'd be.
they looks like right. They could really do some damage with them, That's right. I always said the same thing with the Batarang. I thought the Batarang should be razor sharp as well.
Right.
You have to catch it very carefully when you get it back, otherwise it'll slice your hand off.
Right. Something Joe had mentioned earlier, and it's true that he worked for so many different comics, and I think he did some great work with Charlton. So 1980s comes around, DC gets the Charlton characters. They, purchase it.
Right.
To me, it would seem a hand in glove sort of thing to say to him, hey, we got the Charlton characters. Hey, take your pick of the litter, and would you like to continue with the Question or Blue Beetle? And it just
I
seemed
really
like
don't know what it would be. It would have been wonderful. I mean, I always thought that, I mean, the Blue Beetle and the Question were fabulous characters. I always thought the Question was better than Blue Beetle, but that was my own thing, because it was so simplistic, and it works so well. I mean, that whole explanation of the two-way mirror eyepiece, and the fact that the mist changed the color of his clothes like instantly, and he could just walk around the corner and he was gone. Same thing with the Creeper. The Creeper just had to think about it, and he was He would change his costume. That was the whole thing about how do you change rapidly. You know, I mean, the old Superman in the phone booth, you know, and changes at super speed into Superman, or Batman. I always, in the comics, it always baffled me how Batman could get it into that costume so quickly. But Steve showed you how. You know, if you wanted to get a superhero costume on in a second, here's how you did it, and he made it plausible.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm curious if to step away from the fandom and the friendship you had with him, but as purely as an editor, well, if we want to take a look at his writing, what would you say Steve Ditko's strengths and weaknesses were as a writer, objectively?
Well, his strengths were plotting.
Okay.
His weakness was dialogue.
Okay.
Everybody sounded the same.
Mhm.
You know, he really wasn't concerned with like speech patterns and personalities of the characters and all. So that's why a lot of times other people would dialogue his stories. Like we had Mike Fleischer on The Creeper and things like that. Or not on The Creeper, on what he wrote, Shade, did Shade. Yes. Fleischer did the Shade dialogue. And of course, Stan Lee did all the dialogue in the other books and all. But but his plotting was like flawless. I mean, he really could plot the story and all the twists and turns and surprises. I mean, if you want to read a really great plotted story with the greatest bunch of twists and turns, you read the 2-part Crime Master story in Spider-Man. It was called the Crime Master Mask and Bring Back My Goblin to Me. I forget what the numbers were, but those 2 issues, talk about a really tightly plotted story with some really great twists and turns in it. Really nicely done. 100% Steve Ditko. Wow. You know, plot wise. The dialogue, which is really good, was 100% Stan Lee. You know, but the plot was Steve's, and he was really good at plotting a story. And it didn't matter the length. He could do a really tightly plotted 8-pager and a really tightly plotted, 25-page story as well. It's really good.
So beyond just, how characters were created, worked on, etc., what do you hope that readers learn about Steve through this book? And perhaps what are some misconceptions that they will kind of discover?
Well, one of the things I was gratified about the book was Steve's nephew, Mark Ditko, pointed this out, and something I did sort of subconsciously, but he pointed out the fact that one of the things that comes out in the book is that Steve wasn't just the illustrator of the stories. He was a collaborator, with the concept itself, as well as the artwork of the story. He didn't just draw it. He got into it. He added to it. He expanded the idea and things like that. And I think what I'd really like people to realize is that he was more than an artist. He was a creator. He was an innovator. He was just totally original in his approach to any character that he touched. And I think that there's so many people out there who are just illustrators. They'll just draw the story and that's what they do. But there are certain artists that just go beyond that and just add stuff that you don't even think about. Steve was one of them. Another one was Dick Ayers used to add things to my scripts that I didn't think about, and he used to blow me away with it. So, and I think a lot of the guys who worked for Marvel did that way, because Marvel did it, different than DC. Marvel expected them to work from a plot and then pace out the whole story. DC had a very tight script where they really couldn't expand as much as they were allowed to in Marvel. So that experience of being required to pace the story within the pages out of a plot, I think gave them an advantage to be able to add more than just illustrating to any particular story. And that's what I like to make sure that people realize, that Steve was that, not just a creator, but an innovator, and this was able to add more to anything that he touched. It was really great.
I think you touched upon this before, but in your opinion, did DC use him to his fullest potential when he was there?
No, not at all. No, not in the least. I don't think so. I think they were afraid of him. I really do. Afraid of because again he was very opinionated about what he did, and he if they wanted him to change or do something different that he didn't agree with, he would just walk away.
Right.
He would just, okay, well, if you want to do it that way, I don't want to do it anymore, and
Right.
he would move on. And so they were afraid to push him in any kind of direction because he wouldn't be pushed. He would say no, and he wouldn't be mad, he wouldn't be angry about it, or he would just say, okay, you do it that way, I'm gonna go do something else, thank you, bye. And that was his attitude.
And just to touch on that you just mentioned, that if he didn't feel like doing it, he would do something else. Because I know in the 80s, he was also doing some work with Marvel. He was working on ROM. He was working on other books as well. So did he sort of have an open contract where he could just take? Okay.
He was just a freelancer at that point. He didn't have any kind of now he might have had a contract with Shade. I don't know. I don't know. Not sure if he did. But yeah, he was still a total freelancer. He could work wherever he wanted. He had no exclusive contract with anyone, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have signed any kind of exclusive contract. He wanted to keep it that way. He wasn't about to say, "Oh yeah, I'm only going to work for Charlton." So no,
right,
not going to.
I'm wondering also as well, because it's something that comes up a lot more now. But was he ever hesitant at all to pitch an original idea to DC or to Marvel, knowing that character would then become property of either or?
Well, back then, that's the way it was done. So I don't think anybody really argued or was worried about that, because that's just the way it was done. They knew that. They knew they went in there with that knowledge up front. So it wasn't like they knew that okay, that was going to belong to the company if they published it, and that was it. So I don't think they worried about it at all.
If there was one book you would have liked to have seen him work on, what would it have been?
Oh, Batman, sure. I'd love to see him do Batman. I would have loved to see a Steve Ditko full issue Batman story, and that he plotted. I would love to have seen that, with like someone like Len Wein doing the dialogue, and I think that would have been absolutely stunning. You just find some aspect of Batman's career that we haven't explored, and then let Steve run away with it. And I think it would have been just stellar, just mind-boggling. It would have been great.
So before we go, what do you have anything else you're working on, or anything that we can look forward to from you?
No.
All right. Good night, everybody. It's been fun.
Done and done.
All right.
I'm looking at the Ditko book. I'm thinking, is there something else I could do for TwoMorrows? Is there any other kind of book that I could do? I mean, I get notes and emails from a lot of the people who are working for TwoMorrows on their different books, like Back Issue and things like that. And they'll ask me about aspect. Hey, can you comment on your work on this book or your work on this book? And I'll give them a few paragraphs of that. But I keep thinking, well, is there something that they haven't touched upon that I could write a whole book about? Something else that I didn't do, that I haven't done. One thought I had was like, and talk about it at the end of my book, of all the stuff, the things that Steve and I did that never went anywhere. We created and we worked on and we had drawings for and all, but it never went anywhere. And I figure there's got to be a lot of those out there. There's a lot of I have, a dozen of them here that of concepts and things that we worked up and we presented it to DC and it didn't go anywhere. So, but I'm sure that I'm not the only creator who did that. I'm sure lots of other people. So I think a whole book of that stuff would be a lot of fun, to talk to other creators, especially if there's available art for it. Like, I'll show you what I'm talking about. For instance, and I think this has been published before, but I'll show it to you again. These two are for instance, when Commandy was canceled, Dick Ayers and I thought of another concept for Commandy.
Oh wow!
It's called Commandy, the Lost Boy from Earth, and we teamed up a couple new characters. We teamed up a couple of old Kirby characters like the Witch Boy and things like that.
Yeah.
But this is a whole didn't go anywhere.
Wow.
This one came close. This one's Trevor Von Eden and I did. This is called the Power Squad, and this has Supergirl, Batgirl, Vixen, and the Enchantress.
That's
As a
beautiful.
team, you know.
Wow.
And of course, the Birds of Prey came by later, which
Yeah.
is very similar. It's very similar to this, you know. But I always thought this could be a great book too.
Mhm.
And but there's a lot of that out there, I think, and I think that probably could be a really interesting book if you get, you know, maybe half a dozen or 10 creators showing all the stuff that they created that never got picked up.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you're working on that now. No.
That's my thought. It's turning around in my head. Like I said, I have 2 or 3 right here, and if I could find some other creators who are willing to share some of their old ideas, we could write that up, and it would be, I think, a pretty fabulous kind of book of stuff that never. And who knows? I'm always thinking, well, some publisher sees that and go, "Oh, that's a great concept. I think I'll do that." And then, yeah, this was you pitched this 20 years ago, but maybe now's the time is ripe to try it actually and put it out there. So yeah, that's the idea I've been tossing around in my head.
What about a memoir?
Well, I think the Ditko book is as close as a memoir that I'm ever going to write.
All right.
I talk a lot about how I got into it, and I think that's pretty well covered in the book about how I started in the industry and things like that.
We tried.
Yeah, enough is enough, you know. I actually worried a little bit about there might be too much of me in the Ditko.
Oh, I don't think so.
Working with Ditko, I mean, there's 2 of us there, so we're both represented. So I figured.
There you go.
And we are back. This was fun. It was a great interview. Learning about Steve Ditko, you know, the type of guy he was, his, you know, how he processed, how he thought about work, how he thought about each project. I found it very interesting. Fun interview. And, you know, look, Jack really got to present something that few people have ever been able to do. So, you know, definitely check out this book, Working with Ditko, TwoMorrows Publishing. It's it's really interesting. So I hope you guys check it out. And as always, rate, review, subscribe, send it to your friends. You know, drop a line. Say, hey, look, here's something cool. Check out the latest episode of Dollar Bin Bandits. I think you're going to like it. I do. So definitely do so. And we'll see you next week.